We just saw the rematch at the Glen, as well as a bunch of other crap that really pissed me off. This is going to be a long one, I feel, so you might want to saddle up. This is the fuel. What is happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of the Fuel. Today we're going to be reviewing the lone truck race that I'm going to be reviewing this year, the Eldora Dirt Derby, and the second road course race of the year for the Cup Series at Watkins Glen. So much to go through in this episode. A lot of news stories, and I've got some shit I want to get off my chest, because there's been some things that happened recently and this weekend that have really got my blood boiling. So this is going to be one long ass review, I'd say. So what do you say we get into it with the news of the week? Alright, first off, what happened in the Xfinity race? The 10 of A.J. Allmendinger for Kaulig Racing was disqualified yet again. If you remember, this is the second time that this has happened. The first was at Daytona, where he finished third, and was part of that Kaulig Racing 1-2-3 along with Chastain and Justin Haley. But once again, it is too low in the back. Apparently, from what he's been saying, it was from race damage that was causing it to be too low in the back. But it doesn't really matter in NASCAR's eyes. If the car's too low, then they're going to disqualify straight up. So that's just how that goes. But it's the second time that's happened this year to that 10 car while A.J. Allmendinger is driving it. That's kind of crazy. But now let's go ahead and get into the topic of retaliation. This is something that has been getting a little bit out of control the last couple of weeks. This retaliatory bullshit that's been going on the last couple of weeks, it's really starting to get out of control. It started at Pocono last week, which I'm going to get to something that happened there in a minute. It happened in the Xfinity Series race when Justin Allgaier retaliated against Ross Chastain and put him into the tire barriers in the carousel. And it happened on multiple occasions in the Cup race today. Kyle Busch put William Byron into the grass at one point, even though what happened between the two of them beforehand was a racing incident. So Kyle Busch was a big bitch on that one. And then he basically started door slamming Bubba Wallace, and Wallace said enough of that, and he spun Kyle Busch out. This retaliation crap is starting to get really out of control. I think NASCAR needs to start hammering down on this shit once again, because somebody's going to get hurt out here. I mean, I know these cars are built like tanks, but that does not mean that these drivers are immune to injury. I've stated this I don't know how many fucking times, and I stated it last week. Despite how safe these cars are, injuries still do happen. And this retaliation crap is going to get someone hurt. And I'm not talking about someone's feelings, I'm talking physical injury. It's ridiculous. It's getting to the point where it's getting way out of control. I know I've always said that I would like to have drivers that have personality, but using your car as a weapon is not a way to get me over. And there was even something that happened after the race at Eldora as well. It's getting out of control, and it needs to stop. Speaking of which, Ricky Stenhouse made himself look even more like a douchebag with a tweet that he sent to Kurt Busch, because Kurt Busch tweeted out, said, after sleeping on it, I'm going to you know, be the better man and walk away. I'm paraphrasing here. And then Ricky Stenhouse was like, well, actually, Kurt said, I'll take the high road, and he hopes that Ricky doesn't wreck him. And then Ricky Stenhouse replied with, you can take the high road over to me if you want to settle it. You have my number. Well, if that's not complete and total arrogance, then I don't know what is. And one of these days, his mouth is going to get him in trouble. I mean, it just makes him look like a fucking toolbox, you know, when you make a tweet like that. But he even said in an interview that, you know, Kurt has more to lose than I do. I have nothing to worry about. Well, apparently that was true, because Roush Fenway Racing, apparently, getting to the next topic, has extended Stenhouse's contract through 2021. And this is actually going to segue into my next segment, because I really need to get something off my chest here. It's time for the dumbass of the week. Now, you're probably all wondering, well, you're just going to single out Ricky Stenhouse again like you did last week, right? Because of that tweet he made. Well, no. I mean, there are certainly a lot of candidates for dumbass of the week this week. I mean, sure, you could put Ricky Stenhouse on that list. I mean, you could put Colleague Racing on that list for getting their 10 car disqualified again. Justin Allgaier for being a little bitch. Kyle Busch for being a little bitch. But really, the dumbass of the week is Roush Fenway Racing. What? How? Okay. To Roush Fenway Racing, let me ask you a question, okay? How in the mighty blue monkey fuck does Stenhouse deserve a contract extension? I'm confused. Okay? I mean, it's not enough that this guy acts like a total fucking moron on a constant basis. But let's just look at his racing record. I mean, I realize that there's a bit of a loyalty factor to this. I mean, Roush and Stenhouse have been together since he was a driver in ARCA all the way back in 2008. And of course, they moved him up to the Xfinity Series, where he won back-to-back Xfinity championships. So I'm not taking that away from him. The problem is, when you win back-to-back Xfinity championships, you're expected to come up to the Cup Series, and even if the first couple of years are not that good, you're expected to have some kind of upward trend, right? I mean, that's logical common fucking sense, right? It has been 6.5 years since Stenhouse made his debut full-time in the Cup Series. What has he done in the Cup Series to warrant him getting a 2-year extension? What has he done? Absolutely nothing other than be a fucking maniac on the racetrack and run 20th a lot of times and not even be a factor whatsoever. And before people start, you know, giving me, well, you know, Stenhouse, you know, is driving for, you know, a mid-tier team. Ryan Newman, in his first fucking year, may put that 6 car, which has been the bastard car of that team for many years, into the chase. Now he's on the very ragged edge right now, but he's still got a shot. Whereas, what has Stenhouse been doing? He's languishing 20th in points and basically needs a victory in order to get himself into the playoff. Now, to be fair, I think he does have one more really good chance to get into the playoff, and that's Bristol in a couple of weeks. I mean, it's pretty much a known fact that Bristol is probably his best racetrack. It seems like every time we go there, he's running up at the front. So there's no question Bristol, I think, is his best shot to get back to victory lane. But when you look at his record overall through 6.5 years, it's not that good. And the excuse that, well, he needs time to develop, it's been 6.5 years. I think that's more than enough time for him to develop. He's in his 30s now. He's not a young guy anymore. And he has done jack fucking shit since he's been brought up to the Cup Series. Okay? Now you're probably also going to be saying, well, you're just saying all these things because you don't like the guy and, you know, you just have a bias against him. Really? Okay, well, how about this, Sherlock? How about I bring up some statistics to back up my argument, okay? Alright, let's take a look at this, okay? This is Stenhouse's record from his first year in 2013 all the way up to 2019 as it currently stands. And I'll give you his total starts, total poles, wins, top 5s, top 10s, and his average points finish, and all of his points finishes, okay? 2013, 1 top 5, 3 top 10s, 19th in points. You might think to yourself, well, that was his rookie year. Okay. His second year was even worse. 2014, 1 top 5, 5 top 10s, so there's an improvement, but he also did not qualify for Talladega. That's a pretty big black eye. And he ended up finishing 27th in points. Year 3, 2015, 1 top 5, 3 top 10s, 25th in points. Well, he improved from 27th to 25th. That's like saying you prefer this giant pile of turd to this pile of diarrhea. It's still a pile of shit no matter how you slice the pie. I mean, at this point, if I was a team owner, I'd be looking for somebody else. Because it's pretty clear that Stenhouse just can't cut it in the fucking Cup Series. Now, to be fair, he did improve the next year, 2016, 4 top 5s this time and 6 top 10s. So his best year to date. But he still finished 21st in points. It is still an improvement, but he's still languishing in the midfield 4 years in. But then we get to what is definitely his best year. 2017, where he finally notched those 2 career wins, which were at Talladega and Daytona. But still, 2 wins, 4 top 5s, 8 top 10s, and 13th in points. And he also made the chase, of course, by virtue of the fact that he won at Talladega. And he did get to the second round, so I will give him credit for that. Kudos on a massive improvement. The thing is, when you have a breakout year like that, your next year is expected to go even higher. You're supposed to stay on that upward trend. Did that happen with Stenhouse? Nope. In fact, it has gotten worse from there. 2018, 3 top 5s, 5 top 10s, 18th in points. So we're going back on the downward trend. And it's gotten even worse in 2019. Through 22 races so far, including today, 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, and I think he's still currently 20th in points. So how is a guy on a downward trend still in the Cup Series, let alone getting a 2-year contract extension? Okay, through 241 career starts, 2 poles, 2 wins, 15 top 5 finishes, 32 top 10s. and an average points finish of 20th. And let's look at that top 10 stat. 32 top 10s out of 241 starts. That means there's only a 1 in 8 chance that he will get into the top 10 in a race. One time out of 2 months of competition. 1 out of 8 races, he finishes in the top 10. Once out of every 2 months of races. That's unacceptable. Especially from someone who's in their 7th year in full-time competition. And when your teammate who has been in this series longer than you, who's on his downward trend, you know, because he's in the back half of his career, he's been in the Cup Series, I think this is his 18th year in the Cup Series. So he's been around a long time, and he's in the downward half of his career. He's on the back end. And he's ahead of you in points, and even though he's now deadlocked with Johnson for the final playoff spot, he still has a shot to get into the playoffs on points, whereas Stenhouse needs a win to get in. And yet Stenhouse gets a 2-year contract extension. Am I missing something here? I mean, when you look at the landscape of the Xfinity Series and you see all these young and up-and-coming drivers who are obviously going to start in the Cup Series as soon as next year. I mean, look at guys like Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, Cole Custer. You know, the 3 guys who are kicking ass and taking names in the Xfinity Series. You could probably even throw Chase Briscoe into that list. I mean, these are guys that have proven that they've clearly got the talent, and they're going to be moving up to the Cup Series sooner rather than later. And instead of, you know, going with one of those guys potentially, of course Christopher Bell's probably still sticking with JGR because he's a Toyota guy, but you could have gotten someone like Cole Custer. You could have gotten him on loan from Stewart-Haas, because Roush is a Ford team, Stewart-Haas is a Ford team. I mean, they could have gotten him on a 1-year deal to, you know, try and see what happens. But no, they decide they want to stay handcuffed to Ricky Stenhouse and stay handcuffed to someone who only finishes in the top 10 1 out of every 8 attempts. Where's the logic in that? I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. I'm trying to think through this. Okay, let's put all of the bias aside, okay? Which is what I'm going to do here. I'm trying to put all my bias aside and just look at logic and reasoning. And even then, I don't understand it. I don't understand how Stenhouse is still employed at Roush. I don't get it. I mean, I don't own or run, you know, a multi-million-dollar race team. I'm just an asshole on the internet with an opinion. But one thing I also have is some common fucking sense. And I'm putting this through my common sense, you know, brain here. I'm running it through, and it just does not compute. Especially when you look at these statistics. As my microphone falls off here. I mean, all you have to do is just look at the stats. And look at his attitude over the last couple of years. How is this guy even still employed in the Cup Series? He's garbage. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous that this guy still even has a Cup Series ride right now. But yet Roush Fenway Racing decides to shackle themselves to him for an additional 2 years. His contract runs through 2021. 2.5 more years. Are you fucking kidding me? There's no logic in that. I mean, I don't get it. I honestly don't get it, which is why I'm asking the question. What do you see in this guy? What do you see in Ricky Stenhouse to cause you to re-sign him for a further 2 years? Okay? It isn't like there isn't any fucking drivers coming up through the woodwork. There's plenty of young talent that's coming up through the woodwork. I just named 4 of them right off the bat. And you could have gotten 1, maybe 2 of them. But instead you decide to stick with Stenhouse. I don't know if it's a loyalty thing, but I mean, I can respect having loyalty to someone, but at some point, I mean, you gotta look at a guy's work record and you gotta learn when to cut ties. You know, and looking at this objectively, I mean, I'm looking at the stats right now. I don't see how he could get a 2-year contract extension. I don't. 1 top 10 out of every 8 attempts is unacceptable. Especially when the goal is to win races and contend for a championship. Which I know Roush wants to do. He wants to return to that. You know, he wants to return, you know, back to their heyday in the 2000s when they were competing for race wins and winning championships and all that good stuff. You're not going to do that with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. You're just not. All you have to do is look at his record for the last, and this is not, you know, over 1, 2, or 3 years. No, 7 years. That is more than a big enough sample size to determine whether or not someone can cut it in the Cup Series. It's common sense, people. It's not that hard to figure out. But you know, I guess some people just don't want to hear it and go la 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 and blot it all out and all that other bullshit. And this is not me hating on Stenhouse just to hate on Stenhouse. I'm presenting you with the fucking facts. These are his career statistics in the Cup Series. I'm not making this shit up. Okay, you can look at his record on the internet. NASCAR.com, I think, has it, you know, in their files. You know, all you have to do is just click on the damn link that says like standings or driver statistics or any of that other crap, and you can look it up. It's all there. So, in my opinion, Stenhouse doesn't even deserve to be in a Cup Series ride, period, let alone get a 2-year contract extension. So, for that reason alone, Roush Fenway Racing is this week's dumbass of the week. And that's a pretty big statement considering how many people, the fan base included, who were in contention for that honor this week. There were quite a few people in contention this week. Too many people throwing their goddamn minds out the window. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Sorry I rambled on there, but god damn, man. That just irritated the shit out of me when I saw that. It's like... But whatever. I mean, it's not my race team to run. If they want to sign him to a 2-year deal, more power to him. Just don't come crying to me when he doesn't deliver like he has never done in the last 2 years. 2017 maybe. But other than that, what has he done? Nothing. And that's just the facts. And if you can't handle that, I don't know what to tell you. Told you this was probably going to be a long one. We're already 25 minutes into this video. Well, a little bit longer than that, actually. Already approaching a half hour, and I haven't even gotten into the damn review yet. And there's a lot to talk about in both of these races that I'm going to review. So, what do you say we go ahead and get into that? It's review time. Alright, so the 2009 Eldora Dirt Derby. This is one of those races that I really look forward to because, I mean, it's the only cup race in the top 3 divisions that is run on dirt. So, you know, it is a very special race on the calendar, to say the least. 150 lap race, of course. Stage 1 was 40 laps, stage 2 50 laps, and then stage 3 60 laps. And usually this race is pretty damn good and very entertaining, and seeing these guys just throw the trucks all over the place, you know, go to every groove imaginable. There's like 4 or 5 grooves, and I mean, this race is usually typically very crazy, lots of competition and all that good stuff. I'm just going to let it be known right now that was not the case in this race. This was quite possibly the worst running of the Eldora Dirt Derby in its history. And this was the 7th running, and this one was by far the worst. And I'm going to get into why that is. So Chase Briscoe starts from the pole, of course, the defending winner of this race. All of the Eldora races have had different winners. We haven't had a repeat winner in this race yet. So Briscoe leads lap 1. Todd Gilliland into the wall early in this race, although in the case of Eldora, bouncing off the wall typically gives you a better run for some weird ass reason. Sheldon Creed gets by Johnny Sauter for 4th. 12 laps in, and Briscoe is already lapping trucks, so that just tells you the disparity in speed between all the teams. First caution comes down on lap 13 when the 20 of Landon Huffman spins out in front of the leaders. Thankfully, nobody else gets into him. Briscoe leads on the restart. Sheldon Creed gets by Stuart Friesen for 2nd, and then we get our second caution on lap 24 when Jake Griffin loses the right front tire and spins in turn 1. Of course, they're on the special dirt tires for this race. Briscoe leads on the restart. Creed doesn't get a good restart. Gilliland and Brett Moffitt go by for 2nd and 3rd. Gilliland, God, try saying that name 5 times fast. Gilliland is catching Briscoe for the lead, but Briscoe eventually holds him off, and Briscoe wins stage number 1. The high line was the preferred line in this race, for the most part. Stage 2 was but just wait till stage 3. The caution flags really flew in this one. I mean, I think half of this race was run under caution, and this was a 150 lap race. Anywho, getting to the start of stage 2, the only time drivers could pit for tires and fuel was during the stage breaks. Very special rules for this race because it was a dirt race. You could still come in and get adjustments and stuff, but you can't get tires or fuel until the stage breaks, which is pretty interesting. Briscoe decides to stay out and lead the start of stage 2. They fan out in turns 1 and 2, but we quickly get our third caution on lap 57 when Harrison Burton spins on the backstretch. And then NASCAR decides to wait until he gets it back going again to throw the caution flag. And in addition to all of the caution flags that we saw in this race, the officiating in this race was some of the dumbest officiating I have seen in NASCAR this year. It was bad, which I'll get into why here in a bit. Brett Moffitt loses a couple of laps because his truck started overheating with all the dirt. So, 1 second. So he loses several laps, having to put water in his truck to cool it down. Briscoe leads on the restart. Friesen gets a run around the outside of Matt Crafton and takes over the second spot. Of course, Matt Crafton also a former winner of this race. And then caution number 4 in lap 65, we had a little big one. Big pile up in turn 1 when Christian Eckes spins going into turn 1. It's kind of hard to tell if he spun on his own, which is prone to happen. I mean, it happened to a number of drivers in this race. And it basically caused a huge pile up. There was like 8 trucks involved, including Harrison Burton and Austin Hill. So Briscoe leads on the restart, but it didn't take long for the 5th caution to come out when Mason Massey loses a left front tire and spins out. Briscoe leads on the restart. Creed spins out from a top 5 spot, but gets it back going again. No caution this time. And Briscoe wins stage number 2. So the battle for the lead was pretty much non-consistent. And there just wasn't any... There wasn't any pure lead changes in this race whatsoever. The leader just could not be passed whatsoever. The officiating was atrocious. And way too many damn caution flags. We had 10 caution flags in a 150 lap race, not including the stage breaks. And the reason why I say the officiating was bad was because there was a lot of times under caution that they were trying to get the restart order, figured out. They would go 1 to go at the line, but they would have to add another lap, and sometimes another lap, to get the restart order sorted out. And the crowd was letting them have it. You could hear them, audibly hear them booing when they kept adding, laps under caution, which was certainly a factor at the end of the race, when they could have gotten the race back going many laps beforehand, but it ended up with a 2-lap sprint at the end. That's fucking ridiculous. So this race was a clusterfuck in the worst possible way, not in a good way. And there were many factors that brought this race down. The number of cautions, the fact that the race for the lead was non-existent, the shit-ass officiating. I mean, it all came crumbling together, and it brought this entire race down big time. This time around, Briscoe decides to come to pit road for the tires and fuel, which would ultimately be his downfall in this race. Friesen stays out. They were a little concerned about fuel, but based on the number of cautions that came out in this stage alone, he was fine on fuel. But Friesen leads the start of stage 3, and it's like, well, I don't see anybody getting around Friesen. He's a dirt expert. So was this going to be the race where he got his first career win? Lots of contact on the restart. Our 6th caution came out on lap 96 when Ross Chastain spins off turn 2 and basically got the truck loose. And he basically did loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop. Several drivers get damaged, including Chase Briscoe, who were trying to avoid him. Funnily enough, Chastain didn't sustain any damage in that incident, but other trucks did. Weird. Friesen leads on the restart, but then we get another caution on lap 105, number 7, when several trucks start spinning all over the racetrack. It's like, Jesus. Strickler spins out, Jennifer Jo Cobb spins in turn 4, Tyler Dipple spins off turn 2, collecting Briscoe and Johnny Sauter, with Sauter with severe damage to the left front tie rod. I mean, this caution was kind of crazy. And Briscoe was involved in another one. Friesen leads on the restart. Creed and Marlar are fighting for the 4th position. Then we get our 8th caution on lap 121 when Norm Benning comes to a stop on track. Friesen leads on the restart once again. Grant Enfinger gets by Todd Gilliland for 2nd. And then Briscoe starts coming back towards the front up to 5th and gets by Marlar for 4th. Briscoe gets by Gilliland for 3rd with 18 laps to go. So Briscoe, I mean, he pretty much had the fastest truck in the field, even with the damage. But we got our 9th caution on lap 134 when the 32 of Dodson spins on the backstretch. Looks like he just spun on his own. Friesen leads on the restart with 12 laps to go, but then we got our 10th caution on lap 141, 9 laps to go. Briscoe gets spun by Ben Rhodes in turn 1. Strickler spins to avoid the 27. Joe Cobb spins down at the other end of the racetrack. So yeah, that was kind of crazy. And because the officials took so damn long to get the restart order sorted out, the caution flew with 9 laps to go, and then Friesen leads on the restart with 2 laps to go. That is unacceptable. I'm sorry. It's completely ridiculous. And nobody could challenge Friesen at the end, and Stuart Friesen gets his maiden win at the Eldora Dirt Derby. And then afterwards, Ben Rhodes and Tyler Dipple, I guess, got into it a little bit on the track, and then they had a fight in the infield afterwards. You know, it's whatever. Since I don't cover the truck series, this was just a one-off deal. I'm not going to bother with results and points at this point. It's just kind of pointless, since this is my one and only race. But know that Stuart Friesen finally got that maiden career victory, so hats off to you on that one. But overall, this race fucking sucked. You know, 10 caution flags in a 150 lap race. The officiating was fucking atrocious, and there were no green flag passes for the lead whatsoever. I literally think there was only one lead change the entire day, and that was when Briscoe came to pit road and Friesen stayed out, and that was it. My final rating for the Eldora Dirt Derby is a 2 out of 10. It was just complete fucking garbage. I didn't enjoy it whatsoever. Too many damn caution flags slowed the action. The officiating sucked. No racing for the lead. I mean, this race was just a giant clusterfuck, and not in a good way. So this race was without a doubt a massive disappointment, to say the least. So 2 out of 10 is what I give the Eldora Dirt Derby this year. Without a doubt, the worst running of the race in its 7-year history. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the Cup Series review. Alright, so the 2019 Go Bowling at the Glen, Watkins Glen International, our second of 3 road course races this year. This race could go by many names, honestly. Could go by the Chase Elliott Show, or, you know, as I've called the name of this video, Elliott versus Truex, the Watkins Glen rematch. That's basically what this was. I mean, the end of this race was almost a mirror image of 1 year ago. That's fucking insane. But that race was damn good, because the cat and mouse game that those two play with each other last year was damn good, and we saw a lot of the same this year. No fuck up by Elliott at the end this time, but even though he led 80 of the 90 laps in this race didn't come easy. Truex was breathing down his neck the entire way there. And I got something to say about some of the fans that thought this was not a good race. But we'll get to that at the end of this. So, the stages broke down like this. Stages 1 and 2 were 20 laps. Stage 3, 50 laps. Not much in the way of strategy on this one. Of course, the stages have a lot to do with that. Chase Elliott starts from the pole. Good clean start at the start. Elliott leads lap number 1. Kyle Busch spins in turn number 1 after pushing up into William Byron, fighting for second. He basically jumped off the curb and into Byron, which spun himself out. Did a perfect 360 though, and got back going again, settling into the 10th position. But this would not be the last time that Busch would get into an incident today, so let that sink in for a minute. Truex gets by Larson for 5th in the S's. Almirola reports a possible gear shifter problem, which you don't want a gear shifter problem at Watkins Glen, considering how many times you shift at this track. Kyle Busch starts moving back towards the front, back up to 7th on lap 10, so he proved he had a good car. But he just fucked himself over on so many occasions in this race. Denny Hamlin gets by Byron for 2nd in the bus stop, but Byron gets way out of shape. I mean, he was really loose in the bus stop. Nearly cleaned both of those cars out, but he held on to it. Truex gets by Byron for 3rd in turn 1 on lap 13. Good clean pass. Kyle Busch moves back into the top 5 on lap 14. Several cars come in for service on lap 18 before the pits close, of course. And of course, this is where Kyle Busch nudged Byron into the grass in the bus stop after that incidental contact in turn 1, which was just a racing incident where Busch tried to get underneath of Byron and pushed up into him and spun himself out. Yet it was Byron's fault. Now you understand why I don't like Kyle Busch. Now I think I'll just leave it at that. And Chase Elliott wins stage 1 by 5 seconds. So this race, the stage of the race was eh. And Byron kind of rammed his car into the back of Busch. He was not very happy, although that wasn't exactly smart because it damaged his car pretty good. But Kyle Busch with the bitch move of the race at this point. And at this point I was like, yeah, I'm about sick of the retaliation bullshit that's been happening the last couple of weeks. I mean, like I said at the beginning of this review, it's getting out of control. And that shit needs to stop before someone gets hurt. Of course, Kyle Busch didn't do himself any favors when he got caught for speeding exiting the pit lane. Dumbass. So he goes to the back of the line. Kyle Larson stays out and leaves the start of stage number 2. Truex with one of the best passes of the year in my opinion. Coming to the bus stop, down the long straightaway between the S's and the bus stop. He goes 3 wide with Keselowski in another car, runs out of real estate on the right side of the track, goes off into the grass, has 2 wheels in the grass, but still passes Keselowski and the car that they were beside. If that's not a pass in the grass, then I don't know what is. I was like, damn, Truex is so good on the road courses, he can pass in the friggin' grass. I know he's not the Intimidator, but damn, that was pretty cool, admittedly. The 96 of Parker Kligerman spins in the bus stop after contact with Daniel Suarez. That was kind of a common thing because of the way the bus stop works and jumping over the curbs. And these guys were catching a lot of air jumping over the curbs, especially in the bus stop. I mean, they had all 4 wheels off the ground at one point, going all Dukes of Hazzard and shit. We had our one and only pure lead change on lap 28 when Chase Elliott got by Kyle Larson for the lead. Larson comes to pit road for his first stop on lap 30, and then Truex gets by Boyer for third on lap 33, and then we get our first caution the very same lap when the 77 of Reed Sorensen, I think, has an engine failure or something, because it was smoking going through the bus stop and all the way back to the pit lane, so they decided to throw the caution for that. Elliott leads on the restart. Truex gets by Harvick for second. And here we are once again. Truex versus Elliott. The rematch is on. He actually began catching Elliott for the lead at this point, but then we had our second caution on lap 39. Bubba Wallace spins out in the carousel and gets into the tire barriers. Wasn't entirely sure if this is where Kyle Busch nudged him into the tire barriers. Or if he spun on his own, couldn't really tell, although there was an incident between the two later in the race that may have suggested as much. But Chase Elliott wins stage number 2 under caution, so he wins the first 2 stages. It's pretty obvious at this point that he had a damn good car today. And let's be honest here, Chase really needed this race to go good, because the last 2 months have been absolute. It's basically been a horror movie for him. I mean, the last 2 months have been a nightmare. So he is really, I mean, if there was one track that I felt that he could come back to and get his season back on track, it was definitely Watkins Glen, and he proved that to a T in this race. And considering that the playoff is not that far away, only 4 races now at this point. That 9 team really wanted to get back on track to get themselves ready for the playoff, because I mean, he's made it to the Elite 8 a couple of times, and they really want to try to make a run at the championship this year, and they're definitely carrying the banner for Hendrick Motorsports. So they really needed to get themselves back on track here. So Elliott leads the start of stage 3, and at this point I was like, buckle up. It's Truex versus Elliott, round 2. Fight! These two guys basically proved how good their cars were once again. They just pulled away from the field. I mean, at one point these guys were over 10 seconds ahead of third place. And third place at this point was Kevin Harvick. I mean, if that doesn't tell you how good both of these guys were, then I don't know what will. And then Ryan Newman had a flat right front tire on lap 51, which was huge playoff implications, considering that he was just inside the top 16 with Jimmy Johnson chasing him. So he had to come in to have the tire replaced. It would get from bad to worse for him, though, when he gets a penalty for driving through too many pit boxes. So that basically put him behind the 8 ball for the remainder of the day. Not what he needed, considering that he's racing for a playoff spot. Daniel Hemrick gets into Ty Dillon at the bus stop, which sends Dillon through the grass and Hemrick spinning off into the tire barriers. No caution, though. They both kept going. Truex challenges Elliott for the lead in turn 1 on lap 56, but Elliott holds him off. And then Elliott and Truex split Ty Dillon, who had to come down pit road to get the grass cleaned off his grill, going into turn 6 on this very same lap. And I'm just like, geez, man, these guys are going at it. I mean, this was one hell of a cat and mouse game between these two. I mean, it was very similar to what we saw last year. And I loved that cat and mouse game then, and we saw more of the same in this race. I mean, this was almost like a continuation from last year, which is just crazy to think about. You know, everybody else is almost 10 seconds behind the pair. I mean, these two are in a league of their own. They're in their own zip code. You know, everybody else was just fighting for third at this point. Harvick kicks off the final round of stops on lap 58. And this cat and mouse game between Elliott and Truex even extended to the pit stops. Elliott pits from the lead on lap 60, and then Truex pits the very next lap. Elliott still comes out ahead, but Truex is still right on his heels, and it's just like, geez, not even the pit stops could split these guys apart. I mean, they were within 1 second of each other from the finish of stage 2 onward. I mean, more than half the race, these guys were right there together. We'll get our third and final caution on lap 62, and this is when a lot of shenanigans took place. Jimmy Johnson gets nudged by Ryan Blaney in the carousel, which spins him off into the tire barriers, and he gets quite a bit of damage. Again, playoff implications here. And then down the front stretch, Bubba Wallace, I guess, tries to block Kyle Busch from getting by him. Kyle basically starts door checking Bubba Wallace down the front stretch, and then Bubba's like, fuck you, and spins him out down the front stretch to a thunderous roar from the crowd. But again, I am not a fan of that retaliatory bullshit, especially when you're using your race car. I mean, one of these days somebody's going to get hurt from that shit. I mean, it's been getting way out of control the last couple of weeks. And we're going to a track next week where you definitely don't want to do that shit. I mean, we're going to Michigan next week. Joy. God, that race sucked all kinds of balls previously, and now we're going back there again. But that aside, that is definitely one race where you don't want to go retaliatory mode, considering how fast you go at that track. So that's just my 2 cents on it. So Elliott leads on the final restart of the day, and this is when things really ratcheted up the notch. Truex actually managed to stay alongside Elliott, and coming out of turn 1, battling for the lead, they started to bang fenders a little bit, so it was starting to get physical at this point. Truex remained side by side with Elliott all the way up through the S's, and they came together again in the middle of the S's, and I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, these two are going at it. How these two didn't wreck, you know, in the S's is beyond me, but, you know, that was good, hard racing right there. Elliott was concerned that he might have had a left rear tire going down, but thankfully that was not the case, because this race was just too damn good for it to end like that, which it did not, thankfully. Austin Dillon this time spins in turn 1 after contact with Ryan Newman, basically similar to what happened between Kyle Busch and William Byron earlier, but Dillon gets going again. Eric Jones with another great run. I mean, his 4 straight top 5, I think, when he finished, I think, 4th in this race. So Eric Jones has really started to come on in the last month or so. So considering the fact that Christopher Bell is kind of looming in the, kind of waiting in the wings at this point, I said that, you know, Jones really needs to start laying the hammer down, and to his credit, he has been laying the hammer down the last month or so. I mean, 4 straight top 5s. I mean, of course he's had a lot of mechanical failures that really weren't his fault, but he's also had some performances that were really kind of But give him credit, man. He has ratcheted up his performances in the last month. I mean, to come up with 4 straight top 5s is phenomenal. And considering he's still in the hunt to get into the playoff, he's still kind of in that danger zone. But if he keeps up performances like we've seen the last month, he'll be fine to get into the playoff. Now, how deep he can go is another story, but we'll get to that when we get to that in about a month's time. So Truex and Elliott continue their little cat and mouse game. About 10 laps to go, they start approaching lap cars. Thankfully, they saw the 2 leaders coming and graciously got out of the way. There were a couple that, were trying to stay out of the way, but it was kind of difficult, but they eventually did. But this cat and mouse game continued and continued and continued. Truex, it looked like he had a slightly better car, but he just could not break through the wall of air that was between him and Elliott. And he just kept hoping for a mistake, hoping for a mistake, hoping for a mistake. He was basically hoping for what happened last year when Elliott went into turn 1 on the final lap and wheel hopped it. So Truex was hoping for something like that, but give Chase Elliott credit, man. He was perfect throughout this entire race, leading 80 of the 90 laps and holding Truex at bay for pretty much the entire second half of the race to win the rematch at the Glen for his 5th career Cup Series victory. There are a lot of people saying, Chase Elliott has no talent. Really? He has 5 wins now, and this is what? His 4th year in the series? 4th or 5th year? Can't remember. And he has 5 career wins. Stenhouse has been in the Cup Series, this is his 7th year, 2 wins. And Chase Elliott has been consistently making it to the top 8 in the playoff. Stenhouse can't even get into the damn playoff, and it's 16 drivers. I don't know what else to tell you. Alright, so with that out of the way, here are the race results for the Go Bowling at the Glen. Chase Elliott starts from the pole, wins from the pole, led 80 of the 90 laps, did the cycle, won stage 1, won stage 2, won the race, got the perfect 60, which is the maximum number of points that you can get under this format. Well, unless you count the Cook 600, which you can get 70, but that's a one-off deal. Of course, Truex finished 2nd. Of course, those two once again put on one hell of a show at the Glen. The rematch. Will we see the 3-peat next year? Who knows? We have 2 more Joe Gibbs Racing guys finishing 3rd and 4th. Denny Hamlin, of course, he's finished 2nd, 1st, and 3rd in the last 3 races. Eric Jones started 14th, finished 4th, his 4th straight top 5. Ryan Blaney and Jimmy Johnson had some words after the race. Jimmy was not very happy, of course, because he's trying to get into the playoff and he's right on the razor's edge. And Ryan Blaney spinning him out certainly didn't do him any favors, but Blaney does come home with a top 5. Matt DiBenedetto. And the Levine family racing team started 20th, finishes 6th. Ahead of guys like Kevin Harvick, Kyle Larson, Brad Keselowski, and Kurt Busch, who all finished in the top 10 as well. And Kyle Busch, who finished 11th. Let's be honest here, that 95 car is not exactly the best equipment, but DiBenedetto, he's been doing a great job in that car. So he deserves to be in a slightly better race team. Maybe Roush Fenway, but it is what it is. But anywho, here are the championship standings. Well, let's not forget that in addition to the playoff, there's also the regular season title, which carries with it 15 playoff points, which Kyle Busch and Joey Logano have been in battle for all year long. Logano had been had the edge over Logano had the edge over Kyle Busch for a majority of the season. But with Kyle finishing 11th and where did the 22 finish? 23rd. Damn. That's very it is very un-Penske like. So Logano finished 23rd. Kyle finished 11th. Let's see, Kyle earned 33 points today, whereas Logano only earned 14. So Kyle Busch gained 19 points on Joey Logano in this race. So now, as a result, not very many position changes as far as the overall points, but Kyle Busch moves up into the championship lead. He now has a 13-point edge over Logano. Of course, the regular season title is on the line as well as the 15 playoff points. It pretty much remains the same throughout. Harvick, Hamlin, Truex, Keselowski, Kurt Busch, Chase Elliott, of course, they're all locked in. Eric Almirola is the highest of the non-winners in, and he's pretty safe at this point, being 96 points ahead of 16th at this point, or 17th rather. Ryan Blaney is 10th, Alex Bowman is 11th, but he does have the win, so he's safe. William Byron, then Eric Jones, Kyle Larson, Clint Boyer, who's on the ragged edge, and then we have, of course, the tie for 16th between Jimmy Johnson and Ryan Newman. Now it shows Jimmy Johnson in the 16th position because the tiebreaker would be victories. If there's a tie there, then it would be runner-up finishes, and so on and so forth. Johnson and Newman have 0 victories and 0 runner-ups, but Johnson has more third-place finishes than Newman this year. So that would be the tiebreaker, which would put Jimmy Johnson into the playoff at this point. But there's still 4 races to go. So a lot of stuff can still happen in the next 4 races. Of course, leading up to the regular season finale at Indianapolis, I believe it is this year. Yeah, I think it is Indianapolis this year. So that's how everything looks. As for my final rating for the Gold Bowling at the Glen for 2019, well, there was only one pure lead change the entire race, and Chase Elliott dominated, but and that first stage was god-awful. But let's be honest here, all we needed was Elliott and Truex, and from my perspective, they put on one hell of a show. And there were some fans that were like, oh, you thought this was a good race because Chase Elliott won. Here's a news flash, you dumb fuck. I'm not a Chase Elliott fan. My favorite driver retired a couple of years ago, so I no longer have a dog in this fight. I mean, does it look like I have any Chase Elliott merchandise or any NASCAR merchandise whatsoever? No. I love NASCAR, but I'm not a huge collector of NASCAR stuff. That's more my parents' speed. But, yeah, I mean, there was only 3 cautions the entire day. I mean, this race went by pretty quickly, all things considered. And of course, you know, that long battle, of course, again between Truex and Elliott for the race win, the rematch from last year, and Elliott wins it out yet again. Although this time around, Truex chased him all the way to the line and didn't run out of gas like last year. And Elliott, he definitely had to be perfect this time around, and he got the job done. So great job by him. And honestly, that race between those two was pretty damn good. So my final rating for this race, I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. I think that's fair. That first stage was god-awful, and all the retaliatory bullshit, that was a big turn-off for me. But Elliott and Truex, I mean, that's all I really needed for this race to be a pretty good one. So That's my 2 cents on all that. Oh, well, this race review has gone on long enough. I think I've been rambling on over an hour at this point, and I told you this was going to be a long one, but based, of course, because of that little rant at the beginning, but just a lot of shit that I had to get off my chest, and there was a lot to talk about this week. A lot to talk about. Whew. Well, it's just Michigan next week. No IndyCar, at least until August the 18th, so we're still 2 weeks away from that. So it's just Michigan next week. So hopefully the race review video won't go as long as it has the last couple of weeks, actually. So I think last week went 55 minutes. I think the week before went 52. So the last couple of reviews have been pretty damn long. Oh boy. But you know, I love getting on here and just shooting the shit. You know, it's a nice form of I guess release, I guess you could say. You know, when you gotta get your frustrations out, and afterwards, after you get it all off your chest, you just feel better. So, you know, there's something I love to do, and you know, I still love NASCAR. And this year, they have been pretty damn good for the most part. I mean, the first half of 2018 sucked, and then it really started picking up in the second half. Honestly, for the most part, this entire season has been pretty good. I mean, there have been a few turds here and there, but compared to 2018, this year has been pretty solid. So, hopefully it'll continue into the championship races. And the cat wants in, apparently. So, I'm going to go ahead and end it off here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Peace. Well, that is all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, favorite, like, and subscribe to my channels here on YouTube.com and over on BitChute.com. If you would like to sponsor my channel, go to my channel page at subscribestar.com. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan, signing out. Have a good one.